Shabbat Shalom. I've heard the mask makes it hard to understand me, so I will try and talk slower than I usually do, almost as slow as I tell our B'nai Mitzvah to talk. We'll see how it goes. Ro pointed out to me that this month is Mizrachi or Edot Mizrach History Month for the Jewish world, which got me thinking, and not shockingly, I think relates to the Parsha today, and we're going to get there. I want to tell you some of the stories. First, I want to say a little about what Edot Mizrach can be to us, and then some of the stories that are part of their history. Those of you who are from this community can tell me if I got it wrong. And those of you who aren't can also tell me if I got it wrong, because we're Jews, and that's what we do. The things you may not know, in 1948, I'm all over the place today. Edot Mizrach generally, at this point, refers to Jews of sort of Middle Eastern / Iranian descent, like North Africa and in that area. At one point, they were called Arab Jews, actually, although that's not a term for obvious reasons we use so often anymore, and actually is the root of one of the things I'll be talking about in a little bit. Although sometimes they're subsumed into the category of Sephardi Jews, although that's not always an easy fit, because Sephardi usually refers to the Jews that came from Spain and were kicked out, and that's not necessarily, especially the Middle Eastern Jews. A lot of them lived there the whole time and continued to live there well before Spain and well after Spain. So they just sort of get lumped together sometimes. But in this case, that's the communities I'm talking about. So two things you may or may not know about, or two stories. The first is that in general, 1948, if I asked you what happened in 1948, I'm pretty sure, given who's in the room, most of you would be able to tell me, Israel became a state. It's a great time. Yay, Jewish state. Very exciting. It's actually the war was starting to turn, and we seemed like we weren't going to win. But something else happened at the same time when Israel became a state, which is the Jews in Arab lands fled. That their tenuous, though often fine, relationship with their Arab neighbors or the sovereigns and countries suddenly became untenable. Arab leaders could no longer stomach, conscience, politically defend Jews in their own country, and it became very hostile places to live. So Jews that lived in Iraq, in Yemen, in Qatar, in Saudi Arabia, like really on a dime, had to flee and leave where they were. And many of them walked to the land of Israel in order to get out. It's a fascinating story. There's a famous court case in Israel, actually, just to imagine the differences, about a Yemeni family. A guy makes it to the land of Israel. He's finally safe and he's free, and he's spent years in jail because he had two wives and refused to divorce one of them. But this was his culture. This was the way his family lived, and it wasn't a problem for them. If you have ever seen the sort of famous, in the Hebrew school world, movie Salach Shabbati, it's the story of a Mizrachi Jew who makes Aliyah in the very early stages of Israel, and he lives in tenements while lighter-skinned Jews live in nicer neighborhoods. There's it's a comedy. They do a great job of taking very serious stuff and letting us laugh about it, which also feels very Jewish. But there's this wonderful scene where his daughter falls in love. Sorry, I'm going to get it right. Yes. Yeah, his daughter, no, the other way around. His son falls in love with the daughter from the kibbutz, and the kibbutz is like, great, you guys can get married, no problem, but the culture that Salach is coming from, they have to provide a dowry. And so the kibbutz is like is communal living. And so the guy breaks into the kibbutz money stash and gives the money from the kibbutz to pay for this wedding to happen. And Salach Shabbat is feeling very proud, but then the opposite happens is his son falls in love with one of their daughters, and the kibbutz guy then asks for the money back in a wonderful exchange. But it highlights the difference in culture and what's happening, and that was real. Especially early on in the state of Israel, it was very confusing because the story of Israel publicly, that was ominous. The story of Israel publicly, the story it told itself, was for pale-skinned Ashkenazi Jews move to the land of Israel, work the land, make it come to life, and succeed. So much so that there are many stories of Mizrachi Jewish women in particular trying to bleach their skin so that they would look paler or fit in differently. Their Mizrachi music was not played on the radio. All of these things that you can imagine and we often talk about the conflict between Jews and Arabs and Jews and Palestinians, but early on especially, there was a lot of conflict between Ashkenazi or Jews of European descent and Jews from the Arab nations. And there is like a renaissance in the last 10 or 15 years in Israel where a lot of that culture has become very popular. The music is the top of the charts, and the restaurants are of that kind of food is more popular, but there is still a lot of imbalance there around really the color of skin that is real and deeply problematic. So that's one of our stories. The other you're perhaps more likely to heard because it was much more of a public world event is that in 1979, the Shah of Iran fell to Islamic extremists, to the Ayatollah, and one of the consequences of that is that the Jews fled Iran. But Persian Jews had lived there for well over 1,000 years. So they really have their own Jewish culture, which is the same but different. And a lot of different ways, and the amount that they've been integrated or not integrated into American Jewish life is still up for debate. And there's articles written that in many ways the generation that fled, who is now the youngest of them, are parents of like teenagers. That's sort of where we are in the generation span. Really didn't leave the fleeing behind. That they live that in a post-traumatic stress communally way, in a very real way. That there is constant fear. It is a constant state of unsettlement and sureness that things won't be here tomorrow. So it creates a lot of dynamics. There's a lot of passion. There's a lot of commitment. There's a lot of unity. And there's often a lot of tension, of complications that come with that. In modern American Jewish life, there's a new term, which I think just sounds funny, which is Ashkenormative. That the story that we Ashkenazi Jews tell ourselves is that American Jewry is Ashkenazi, and that's the de facto, that's the standard, and other kinds of Jewry are like nice things to try when you have a program on like Tuesday nights or something like that. But they're not the norm. They're not the regular thing. And so there's been a push in the last 5 or 10 years to change the language and the way we talk about, even in American Jewry, about the Eidot Mizrach in particular, Sephardi Jewry in general. I'm forgetting the name of the organization at the moment. I'll think of it afterwards when it won't be helpful, but they did a survey of all of American Jewry and said 1 in 10 Jews in America are consider themselves a Jew of color, a Jewish person with skin that isn't white. Yes? Yes. Yes, so I was using the yes, even better, the full term. Not Ashkenazi. How about that? Is another way to put it. Everything else that fits in there. So it's a reminder. I tell these stories, and then I think about our Parsha this morning. And I think about Abraham choosing to buy the Machpelah. So Abraham, his wife of many years, Sarah, his partner in this endeavor of creating the Jewish people, dies. And he goes to the local people and tries to buy a cave to bury them in. This is a bizarre, up and down thing to do. Abraham has now lived for years in the land of Canaan and is wealthy and possesses, or at least runs, or is in charge of lots of land. Why does he have to go buy land from someone else? Not only that, but the story goes that he goes to the local people and it was like, let me buy the land. And they're like, Abraham, we love you. Take the land. It's yours. It's a gift. except that in the ancient world, particularly in this culture, a gift was returned at a later generation. It wasn't permanent. That was the way land worked. They were basically giving him free use of the land, but not ownership, which is why Abraham not only pays, he pays a hefty sum, and he pays in a way that it's very public. He has this conversation with Ephron, with the guy who owns the piece of land, in front of all of the elders of the town, so that no one can say he didn't really sell it, he didn't really buy it. It becomes the first piece of the land of Israel that is unquestionably Jewish, owned and operated by, I guess, is the Jewish people. And with that, Abraham changes the story in a lot of ways. I was just working with a bar mitzvah on Parshat Beshalach, the splitting of the sea. And before they make it, the beginning of the parsha, it says, and they took Joseph's bones with them, because Joseph made the people promise that when God remembered them and brought them back to the land of Israel, that they would take Joseph's bones and bury him in the Machpelah. Abraham makes a purchase, and 400 years later, his great, however many grandchildren, take his bones and move them back to this place that's part of the story of going home for them. So what I am stunned by is, let's take it this way. There's a word in English that really means two different things, but we use it interchangeably, sort of by accident. The word is myth. Now, in common parlance, we often say myth versus fact. So myth is a fake thing and fact is a real thing. But there's a much higher usage of the word myth, which is foundational story, where the veracity of the story is irrelevant. That's not the point. The point is it's a story we tell ourselves often enough that it becomes part of our identity. It becomes part of who we are. It's why I'm never so moved by all of like every year on Passover, someone publishes an article about some archaeological dig that proves or disproves that Passover story happened. Like every year, without a doubt, you're welcome to share. The congregants love sharing these articles with me, and I like to read them. Please share them. But I'm somewhat unexcited by them because it doesn't affect my own belief or my own understanding, because the story of the Exodus isn't important because it happened exactly the way the Torah happened. The story of the Exodus is important because we tell it to each other over and over again, because it tells us who we are as a people. We are a people who understands what it means to be oppressed. We're a people who believes that even though the oppression feels overcomable, that faith means we can overcome it. We are a people who believes there is a promised land, and to get there, we have to journey through the wilderness together in order to make it happen. That's what the story is about. That's why I retell it over and over again. And in this case, Abraham tells a story about the land by buying a piece of it. He tells us that this is our land, our place to return to. He tells us that one of the ways we remember our loved ones is by having a firm place to mark their passing. Sarah, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Leah, Joseph, they don't live in the Machpelah. Their life isn't there, but in many ways their story is. Their ability to affect us is found in that place. It's one of the reasons we're so horrified when a cemetery is defaced. From a practical point of view, what difference does it make? No one lives there, literally. It is stones and grass. They killed no one. They hurt no one. It is monuments. It is not people that is hurt. But it affects us so deeply, not just because it is holy place, not just because it is a sacred space, but because it is the place we have given to hold the stories of our ancestors. It is the physical location we have assigned to make as a foundation for how we see ourselves. So we go back to the Edot Mizrach, and how does this all fit in? It is a reminder of two things. One, not three, maybe I'll think of a third, I apologize. The first is that we control that myth with the capital M. The stories we choose to tell is a choice we make, and we can add grow and change them as we realize there's stories or components we are missing. And the second is, in order to do that, sometimes we need stuff. We need things, we need places, we need concrete things to draw us together. Jesse's grandfather passed away over the summer. May his memory always be a blessing. He was a great man. We agreed on almost nothing, but he was a wonderful person. And he collected porcelain birds. Now, does any of us need porcelain birds? No. But each of them is a place for us as the grandchildren generation to gather together and point to and tell a story of his life. That's when he took their grandma to China and they had this visit. That's when he went and was able to have X experience, etc. So as we think of what does it mean to be a Jewish person, as we think about legacy and generations and Lador Vador and what comes next, our challenge, of course, is to tell the story that we've been telling our whole lives. Our challenge is to challenge ourselves to hear other stories and incorporate them in. And our challenge is to give each other and the next generation concrete items or places to be foundations, to be grounding places, points for those stories. Shabbat Shalom. Peter.